So it's a pleasure for me to be with you to engage in an opportunity to continue my own osmosis of the Jesuit virus, that unshakable experience of knowing that we can and do learn from each other and engage in responsible action for social change. What an honor it is to be with you. Let me begin this morning with a poem from Mary Oliver. This poem is entitled Sometimes. 2 or 3 times in my life, I discovered love. Each time it seemed to solve everything. Each time it did solve a great many things, but not everything. Yet left me as grateful as if indeed and thoroughly had solved everything. Instructions for life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. As you may know, Mary Oliver, one of America's beloved poets, died this last winter at the age of 83. Oliver's poetry is marked by plain, everyday language that she used to convey extraordinary insights from the very ordinary experiences of humanity. Oliver especially paid attention, minute attention, to the details in nature which helped direct us and direct all the readers of her poetry to insights that we would otherwise have passed by. In her poem, Sometimes, Oliver offers these 3 instructions: pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it. These 3 imperatives, of course, are the poet's vocation. Her task is to tell the world what paying attention has revealed to her, what has astonished her. That by paying attention, we understand that it's not only the poet's vocation, but it's our vocation as Jesuit leaders, especially as leaders of Jesuit schools. Paying attention to God's presence in our lives is a habit of mind, heart, and will. And it requires practice, effort, and concentration. It is one of the habits that is essential to the Jesuit way of proceeding that has shaped our 480-year legacy. At this colloquium of Jesuit school leaders, we highlight the essential habit of paying attention with a particular perspective of how prayer, paying attention to God's work in our world and in our work, empowers our schools to go to the educational frontiers, to be those incubators for justice and hope that our world desperately needs. This morning, I hope to explore with you some of the tools we have within our toolbox from those Jesuit ways of proceeding. Some of the resources we have at hand because we are members of Jesuit schools. And some case studies that we share as our legacy. All which provide us with inspiration and motivation to move our schools to an educational frontier where a tender God can be discovered. Let's begin looking at the examine. The exercise of reflective awareness by which we can find God in all things and in particular in our own experiences. By setting aside some time at noon and in the evening, or maybe just at one of those times, we have an opportunity to assess, We're better tomorrow than we were today. A long, loving look at our own lives helps us see where God is moving us to become conscious of where God is calling us into deeper conversations and deeper intimacy. The examen, as we well know, begins with gratitude to God for all the gifts that we have, allowing ourselves to become aware of God's presence, to ask for God's grace, to know where we have failed, and where we have failed to do the most good, and to ask for God's strength, to understand why we cling to obstacles which prevent us from doing the most good, and give us the unction in our motion to resolve to improve in significant ways. These last few years, all the Jesuit universities and colleges in the United States and Canada were asked by Father General to participate in an institutional examen to determine mission priorities for the universities and colleges for the next 5 years. Although we were provided with a protocol for the process, each university was asked to determine the best approach, taking into consideration the unique context in which each university and college found itself. We were able to do that this last year at Loyola University Chicago and found to our great amazement and astonishment that one of the things that our faculty, staff, and board of trustees and students all recognized as a need they have for the next 5 years is to delve more deeply into our intellectual heritage and into our spiritual life as Jesuit universities. To use the tools that we have at our disposal in a more regular way within the very life experience and administrative experience of the university. And in fact, to begin to use communal discernment as a standard way of making decisions. Often the examen is linked to communal discernment. And because we're leaders of Jesuit universities and colleges and schools, it's appropriate that we examine how our schools can benefit by using communal discernment as a decision-making process. Discernment, as we know, is the process of choosing the most good among many possible goods. As school leaders, we ordinarily experience the tension between the scarcity of resources and the seemingly unlimited needs that are called to our attention on a regular basis. As school leaders, we are also quite aware of the importance of the relationship between our passions and the school's needs, and sometimes mistaking our ego needs for our passions. Using communal discernment, however, helps us reframe our ego needs and personal bias with the insights, reflections, and wisdom of others in our school community. Using both intellect and emotion, we proceed through communal discernment by weighing the elements of every decision vis-a-vis the school's mission, our nation values, our present opportunities, and certainly the challenges that we know we need to overcome. A prayerful discussion of pros and cons with a healthy dose of Ignatian indifference help lead us to consensus, not absolute certitude. But the purpose of communal discernment is not absolute certitude, but developing a sense among all the members of the group that each has been heard, respected, and affirmed. Communal discernment presumes the generosity and capability of helping people while asking critical questions. How can we as school leaders best enable young people to flourish in our present context? Humble discernment is characterized by engaging participants in that prayerful, courageous, and holistic process as we wrestle with those big issues and complex values that often compete with each other. In our toolbox of Jesuit wisdom, we also have the spiritual exercises. We know that integrated imaginative prayer was one of the things that drove St. Ignatius's spiritual life. Imagination through both contemplation and meditation on the lives of the saints and the life of Jesus in the gospel played a central role in Ignatius's conversion and in his lifelong, deeply intimate relationship with God. Imagination, meditation, and contemplation lead us so that we can know and love God. And through that we can come to know his abiding dedication to us as we pursue loving service and solidarity with and for others. Ignatius's grasp of God's overwhelming concern for the world, God sending Jesus into a world immersed experience, gave Ignatius a love for God and for others that was based on the unfathomable love, compassion, and understanding of God. When Ignatius followed Jesus, he allowed Jesus to fill his senses so that God could penetrate into the places that intellect fails to go, which brought Jesus in touch with his heart, and which inflames our hearts so that love overflows us and engages us in generous service. Part of the power of the spiritual exercises is in its encouragement of the imaginative participation in the story of Jesus' life, death, resurrection, so that God's grace can help us reconfigure our own life and move us into life-giving, life-enhanced service that does not grow fatigued. Through the exercises, we can experience the sacred within the secular. We can experience the effects of our broken relationships within a context of a loving God. We can experience the regenerative power of our Earth's cycles and the resilience of people as we come to understand life's synergy, and life's synergy because of the resurrection of Jesus. The exercises help move us into the mystery of God, as well as into the mystery of our own personhood, as it empowers us with a love that unites and does not fragment. It's of no surprise that in commenting on the universal apostolic preference, the Holy Father insisted that the spiritual exercises are crucial because it presupposes a basic condition of the Jesuit relationship with the Lord in a personal and communal life of prayer and discernment. Without this prayerful attitude, the Holy Father continued, the other preferences will not bear fruit. And more on the universal apostolic preferences in a few minutes. We'll just briefly examine Ignatian pedagogy. Ignatian pedagogy, as we know, is based on a firm foundation of the spiritual exercises. And it fosters the flourishing of people through your rigorous investigation, reflection, questioning, all within the framework of human freedom. Ignatian pedagogy rules out any semblance of indoctrination or entrapment. Jesuit pedagogy enables students and teachers to explore reality with open hearts, minds, and wills. Jesuit pedagogy enables us as teachers and learners to be critical thinkers who can probe crucial human problems as a means of developing a spirit of generous and productive engagement. Through service, teachers and learners can discover the dialectic of faith and justice, of action and contemplation, as well as the importance of assessing results as a means of continuous quality improvement. The universal apostolic preferences were developed as a result of General Congregation 36 after a 16-month process of communal discernment by Jesuits and their companions throughout the world. Their discernment, our discernment, resulted in choosing from multiple possibilities for finding the best way to collaborate in the Lord's mission. The best way to serve the church at this time. The best contributions that we can make with the present limited resources that we have, so that we can seek to do what God is asking us to do, to create more universal good within this world. And because the Jesuits consider all of us as their partners, all of us as their companions, we all have an opportunity to embrace the universal apostolic preferences as a dynamic means to guide our minds, hearts, and wills in shaping ministry for this next decade. I think it's also important to note that the Father General and Pope Francis intentionally chose the word preferences rather than priorities in entitling these four ministerial choices. I would suggest that there is a profound reason, because there's always a profound reason within the Jesuit community for that choice. Preferences provide us with an orientation, a motivation, and an inspiration for an integrated approach to our lives of service. They provide us with that dynamic tension between being and doing, reflection and action, justice and faith. At Loyola Chicago, we often experience imbalances, unlike any of your institutions. The promulgation of the universal apostolic preferences could not have come at a better time for us as we begin to implement our mission priorities that have emerged from our common mission priority statement. And as we seek to discern our 2025 strategic plan. The first of the preferences to show the way to God through spiritual exercises and discernment. And in describing this preference, Father General asks us all to resolve to collaborate with the church in experiencing secular society as a sign of the times that affords us the opportunity to renew our presence in the heart of human history. It does not ask us to decry or judge secularity or secularism or the secular context in which we find ourselves in our schools, but asks us to embrace it, to learn from it, to see how we can find God within the very heart of secularism. The other reference is to walk with the poor, the outcasts of the world, those whose dignity has been violated in a mission of reconciliation and justice. By following this path, we see that the poor help us understand the face of God, help show us the way of our own poverty and see how poverty has deeply embedded itself within our lives. But it also calls us to work with others, to change those social structures which generate injustice. This path, walking with the poor, includes a necessary dimension of reconciliation with and among God, God's people, and nature itself, as we identify how we can change those unjust social structures. The third reference to accompany youth is one that I'm sure found a place in your hearts, as it did in mine. To accompany youth who often look at us as people who have betrayed them because they have inherited an earth of which we are not proud. To accompany young people in the creation of a hope-filled future. We understand that our young people who desperately seek meaning in the faces of unbearable challenges and unbearable disparities. This gives us an opportunity to accompany our young people by sharing with them ways in which the good news and meaning and purpose and life can be found within our world of woe. And yet, hold up opportunities for change, for transformation, for the hard work of approaching those worldly woes, those vexing common human situations that attack the very basis of the flourishing of life. Let us join our young people in finding this world of hope and justice. And the final preference, to collaborate in the care of our common home. Here at Loyola, I hope you recognize the fact that we take sustainability seriously, that we look at how to create sustainable relationships, sustainable faith life, sustainable processes and life habits that will enable us to know the difference between the love of the materiality and materialism, to show the way to God, to caring for our common home in a way that leads us to prune away those sins of greed and depth of despair that come from our misuse of the world's resources. To create that respect for all of creation and for all of human life, so that we can ensure that there is a just distribution of the world's goods, and that we can ensure that every human being in every part of our cosmos and every corner of our world can flourish as God has meant it to be. In this morning's presentation, I would like to reflect on how these Jesuit ways of proceeding provide us with inspiration and dynamism so that we are empowered to continue our Ignatian legacy of transformative education, especially in regard to shaping our schools as laboratories of innovation, as incubators for justice and hope. I know that's quite a mouthful, but I hope to delve into Mary Oliver's instructions with us, how paying attention, being astonished, and telling about it guide us in our Ignatian mission. We are very blessed by having a network of schools that share some common characteristics. When people look at Jesuit schools, we can identify that our schools are mission-driven. We are mission-driven communities in which the service of faith and the promotion of justice is operationalized, and in which we commonly strive to bring faith and justice together in substantial ways. We look at ways in which we pursue religious experience, not just within people who share our Catholic faith, but with people of all faiths and with people of goodwill of no faith. We have a large tent because we see God's presence in all of God's creation. Faith, reason, and will are integrated in everything we do within our missions. Faith, reason, and will provide us with the opportunity to delve into the mystery of God, the mystery of personhood, and the mystery of the cosmos. We also share a common perspective on cura personalis and cura apostolica. We care for the whole person and we care for the whole institution, the whole apostolic, intellectual apostolate that we share. Our genuine love for young people and for our teachers and for our parents and for our faculty enable us to find God's presence in that genuine love or being affection for each other. This motivates us to engage in discovery, knowing that no part of the human experience is off limits, knowing that who we are and why we are here are part of our playing field. Likewise, we care for the entire apostolate. We care that our schools meet more than one bottom line. We care that our schools create an environment in which people flourish as employees, as well as co-ministers with us. We strive to create ways in which our schools can leave the world a better place after we are long gone. We care that we offer an education that brings light, hope, justice, and reconciliation into the world. We care that we create an environment in which all flourish, all are respected, and in which human freedom is nurtured. Another common characteristic of our schools is that we are always concerned with the marginalized. We develop school communities in which options for the margins, those on the margins, are always discovered and pursued. How can we make our education more accessible in a way that breaks down the borders? How can we make our education more accessible for students who learn in different ways, who approach life in different ways, who come from families that are beyond even sometimes our imaginations? Much less, how can we approach creating schools in which financial obstacles are well addressed? So when we look at accessibility, we look at accessibility way beyond only a financial accessibility. We look at programmatic and spiritual accessibilities for our students as well. How do we introduce that common concept of solidarity? How do we ensure that there is no shadow between the us and them, as Father Gregory mentioned? How do we bring that kinship of God? into everything that we do in our school communities. We know that this is a challenge. We know also that we join each other in striving to meet those challenges. We also celebrate a world-affirming educational program. We embrace the radical goodness of the world and of the secular, of the entire dimension of human experience, even that which might be in the shadow, and that might be part of our sinful reality. Because we believe God is working in the midst of the material world, and we are called to do the same. God is and can be discovered in the midst of tension, strife, and disease. And we are invited to be with God there as well. As Jesuit schools, we are also called to be at the frontiers. Pope Benedict was not the first to describe the work of the Jesuits at the frontiers. We know that we have been at those frontiers because we are not afraid of those dimensions of human reality that are difficult to reach or what others do not reach. We know that if we don't work with God at those borders, that the tender love of God will not penetrate our hearts or the hearts of the students that we serve. Sometimes our frontiers are not far from us. They can be the frontiers of the Generation Z, millennial teachers, helicopter parents. But we also know that some of those frontiers are intellectual frontiers, frontiers of neuroscience, frontiers of artificial intelligence. We know that some of them are frontiers of wealth and disparity, frontiers of human trafficking and overindulgence, frontiers of homelessness and hunger. We know that those frontiers beckon us, and beckon us not as people who are coming to solve the situation, but coming to work in solidarity with our brothers and sisters who can teach us more about the tender nature of God. Frontiers, wherever they might be, are opportunities in which we become washed with our brothers and sisters who are simultaneously marginalized and empowered. As Father Greg reminded us yesterday, we go to those frontiers because that is where we meet God. We go to the frontiers with courage, with faith and trust. And courage, faith, and trust are virtues that have typified the Jesuit legacy of the last 480 years. We know that our schools are founded within those virtues. And we can venture into these new frontiers because our common postulate calls us to be there. The last thing, the last section of my presentation today, is to talk about some case studies that have emerged out of the Chicago Jesuit experience. I'm sorry that I don't have a full portfolio of all the many ways in which Jesuits have gone to the frontiers to create new incubators for hope and justice throughout the world. And I'm sure that I can engage in learning more about some of those frontiers from you as we continue to engage in conversation. But I'd like to share with you just a few Chicago experiences to give you a flavor of the kind of big shoulder city that Chicago is. In August of 1856, just a really beautiful time to be in Chicago, Father Damon was asked to provide 3 weeks of mission experiences for the people of Chicago by Archbishop O'Regan. At that point, Father Damon had already made quite a name for himself as an effective pastor and as an eloquent preacher as he did missions across the United States. So coming from St. Louis to Chicago in August was probably a step up in terms of environmental gifts. Because although we do have a deeply humid culture, not nearly as humid as St. Louis is in August. 1856 August, brutally hot and humid. Father Damon was able to draw crowd after crowd after crowd, over 12,000 people in all, to his missions. His missions started out at Old St. Mary's Church and had to move across the city because there wasn't room at Old St. Mary's for all the people who wanted to hear and to be nourished by his word. Bishop O'Regan mentioned that Father Damon had no difficulty providing opportunities that were engaging, that fed the life and the minds and the hearts of the vitality of the people of Chicago in terms of their faith. And Father Damon didn't give the hour-and-a-half talk that many of our parish missions participate in these days. But he would start off often at 4 o'clock in the morning to a direction and with opportunities for confession, and would go often until midnight every day during those 3 weeks that he was in Chicago. Those 3 weeks that Father Damon spent in Chicago not only whetted the appetite of the people of Chicago for a Jesuit presence in the city, but it whetted his imagination for what he could accomplish here if, in fact, the Midwest province were enlarged to include Chicago. Bishop O'Regan, who was the Bishop of Chicago at that point, wrote Father Peter Becks in Rome, asking for Father Damon to open up a Jesuit presence in Chicago. And Father Becks responded, "A Jesuit presence in Chicago is worthy of our zeal and compatible with our institute. The Jesuits can be of great service in promoting the Catholic faith in that central city, which seems ever on the increase." As Father Damon then received the mission to go to Chicago, to come here to Chicago, to leave St. Louis, the very flourishing parish that he was at, and to come here, the Superior of the Missouri province, Father John Brightus, reminded Father Damon, "Remember why we go to Chicago, for the honor and glory of God, to serve the greater glory of God and the good of religion, the good of souls." Father Damon came to Chicago. Within 3 years, he was able to select and build a church, not on the site that Bishop Reagan first recommended. That was at a site closer to where our Water Tower campus is, closer to the cathedral, which was at that time a commercial and business sector of society. But Father Damon chose to go to 12th Street because it was teeming with immigrant Catholic families who could fill a church and fill schools. Within 10 years of Father Damon coming to Chicago, he not only founded 1 parish and 1 school, which he did, but soon he decided that the families needed schools, Catholic schools, parish schools from Holy Family that would serve the girls in the families, that the boys in the families were already being served. So within 10 years of Father Damon's experience, his first arrival in Chicago, Holy Family Parish was established, but it also established a network of schools, wherein over 8,000 young people, all from immigrant families, were taught and engaged in a transformative education that whetted their appetite to become not only citizens of the United States, but shapers of society. The development of Holy Family in St. Ignatius College, which by the way was granted a charter by 1870, helped provide the people of Chicago with a transformative educational experience and a network of schools that otherwise would not have been available to them. I'd just like to say that this was even before there was such a thing as mandated education. There was no public school system at that point in time that Father Damon helped build the school system for immigrants and laborers that helped transform the face of Chicago and the face of the world. St. Ignatius College continued to grow, and under the worthy hand of Father Alexander Burroughs, it was transformed from a college to a university and with professional schools. By 1910, Father Burroughs, who at that point was the new president of St. Ignatius, and provided an opportunity to move the school and to include in the school not only the regular liberal arts programs, but also professional schools of medicine, law, and social work. In 1910, he gave a speech in which he said, "A liberal education is the best preparation for a professional and business career." Here and this is the first time when the term Loyola University is used, Loyola University emphasizes the importance of integrating laboratory instruction with theoretical instruction, so that a Loyola education can produce a great many scientists and not any mechanics. By 1913, Loyola had added a pharmacy and engineering program to its law, medicine, and social work programs. By 1914, Loyola University opened its doors to another previously underserved population, women. So by 1914, Loyola already has embraced the education of women in professional schools as part of its mission. Skipping about 100 years, let's go to the beginning of the first Cristo Rey here in Chicago. It was the beginning, early 1990s. And at that point, Father Baumhart, who had been the long-standing president of Loyola University, retired and came to work at the Archdiocese of Chicago. At which point I was lucky enough to meet Father Baumhart and to be involved with him in some of his creative thinking. At one point he said to me, "You know, Jan, Father Rupe was talking to me, and he said, it just seems very interesting that we have to spend so much money giving our young Jesuits an experience in poverty." Father Brad Sisler was provincial at that time, and he, as well as some of the other Jesuits, were also wondering, what can we do to give our young Jesuits an opportunity to work in solidarity with the poor? Right here in Chicago. So the Jesuits began looking around and said, well, maybe let's start looking at an underserved population. Let's go to the frontier here in Chicago, and look at the Mexican immigrant population that is in Pilsen. And so he approached the cardinal at that point and said, one of the parishes in Pilsen was in need of some ministers, some priests. And so they approached the cardinal and said, Cardinal, we'd love to be able to staff St. Procopius Parish, which had long time been a Benedictine parish in Chicago, and no longer had Benedictine support. And so St. Procopius was located within the heart of Pilsen, and the Jesuits began to minister there in Pilsen. They walked the streets, they interviewed people, they talked with people, they heard confessions, they engaged in the kind of viability study that only Jesuits can participate in, because they reached not only into the need for education, but it also reached into the needs for the people in their hearts and souls. And they also reached into some of the resources that they had at that point, which were some Jesuits who needed some more opportunities to work in solidarity with the poor. So they asked Father Jim Gartland and Father Ted Munz to continue a viability study of what could the Jesuits do within the Mexican immigrant population. And then Father John Foley, who had spent 35 years in Peru, was coming back to the United States. Father Foley had led a very successful educational experience in a school system called Cristo Rey, by the way, while he was in Peru. And then Sister Judy Murphy, who had been a very successful principal and president of one of the Catholic schools, high schools here in Chicago, was finished with a sabbatical from the University of Notre Dame. And so she became free. And so the Jesuits said to Judy and to John, would you two like to work with the folks at St. Procopius to see if, in fact, we could develop a new model for education? And so the Jesuit leadership, with some brilliant Jesuits and some other folks, began a planning effort, at which we began to look at creating a new school model that was based on assets and an appreciation of the resources of the Mexican immigrant population, and provided them with access to a new educational experience that they had been financially locked out of. So the first Cristo Rey was developed. Now, 35 schools later, the first generation principal, Cesar Munoz, a graduate from Cristo Rey here in Pilsen, will be the new principal of Miami Cristo Rey. So we see great, yes. So we see the amazing kinds of incubators for creating schools as incubators of justice. As we see our generation of leaders creating leaders instead of followers, it seems to be the Jesuit way of proceeding as well. Here at Loyola University, we also do our best to be incubators for justice and hope. Our 2015 strategic plan helped us to develop the infrastructure to create undergraduate research, international study, and transformational education. Our Institute of Environmental Sustainability and our Center for Aviation Pedagogy were both born out of our Strategic Plan 2015. Our Strategic Plan 2020 focused on increasing student access and success for underserved populations, advancing the social justice agenda through faculty development, promoting multidisciplinary collaboration to address societal challenges, and engaging partners to address global and societal challenges. Our 2020 plan gave birth to Arube College and to our new School for Public Health. As our Plan 2025 emerges, It looks like we will begin to address more initiatives through which we can continue to develop knowledge in service of a more just, humane, and sustainable world. I would like to lift up just two initiatives that have come from our strategic planning that are great examples of Jesuit values of creativity and innovation, and which also promote the four universal apostolic preferences. They are the Healing Earth, open source electronic text, and I know Mike Schuck has given presentations to you, not only in Rio, but also here the other day. So that you know well that the Healing Earth is an environmental science textbook written by women and men from across the world who share our common concern for our home, the Earth. This text is edited by Mike Schuck and Nancy Tuckman, two of our amazing professors. As an international Jesuit ecology project, Healing Earth was recently awarded the Expanded Reason Award from Pope Francis. This online resource uses a multidisciplinary approach to address 6 environmental threats: decreasing biodiversity, shrinking natural resources, transition to renewable energy sources, diminishing fresh water supplies, declining food quality, and the changing climate. Each of these is addressed from a scientific viewpoint, a theological viewpoint, an ethical viewpoint, and a spiritual viewpoint. The aim of this text is to provide us with an international dialogue on how we all can participate in creating a new earth, a healing earth, rather than a dying earth. Because we know that together, across our disciplines, and in developing new knowledge because of that cross-disciplinary engagement, we can address these vexing human situations. The development of Arupe College also is one of the responses to how can we serve an underserved population and how can we increase accessibility to education. We've been able to find talented young people across Chicago from our underserved neighborhoods whose educational programs have not led them, not provided them with a pathway to a 4-year liberal arts education. Our Arupe College, started by Father Steve Koutsouras, was first begun as an opportunity to use a junior college program with core courses that would be transferable to a 4-year liberal arts program and not give an unbearable debt, financial debt, to the families of those children in the college. We originally thought that both Pell monies and Illinois state monies could totally cover the cost of their tuition so that young people could emerge with an associate degree, ready for a 4-year college without any debt whatsoever, but with an educational profile that would enable them to succeed in any 4-year university in the United States. Every year, Arupe has added on new programs, new opportunities, and new experiences for students. Because as a Jesuit organization, they've looked at how they can improve what they've been offering. So we first started out looking at only core courses, but then our students said, couldn't we have some courses in marketing? Couldn't we have some courses in business? Couldn't we have some courses in psychology? And this year, they've been asking us, couldn't we have some STEM courses with laboratory experiences? So every year, we continue to build on the Arupe model to increase the opportunities for the young people there. We've also developed very, almost intrusive, as Father Katsuras would say, counseling experience for our young people. So that our young people, as Father Greg would talk about having a perfect 10 on an ACE profile, would have the social workers, the psychologists, the opportunities to find alternative living experiences because they were homeless. Opportunities for them to engage in living experiences not within their own gang-related territories, but closer with Mercy housing services that not far from our campus of Arupe. So we've been able to expand the kind of counseling, social work, social service providers, so to create wraparound services for the young people of Arupe. I'm sure you're familiar with the very low percentage rate of Hispanic students who actually graduate with an associate degree from junior colleges throughout the United States. Less than 30% of students who enroll, Hispanic students who enroll in junior colleges across the United States actually come out with an AA, and that's after 4 or 5 years. At Arupe, we're up to about 86% graduation rate in 5 semesters. We weren't able to make it necessarily in the 2 years that we thought, but when we upped it to 5 semesters instead of 4, we were able to dramatically increase the graduation rate and then the transition into a 4-year liberal arts college or a 4-year university upon the completion of their AA. The last program that I want to talk about is the Theology of Healing Earth in Action, or the THEA Institute. Many of your students are actually enrolled in this program, and I hope next year many more of your students will be enrolled in that program. The THEA program is a week-long pre-collegiate experience here at Loyola, dedicated to environmental sustainability, spirituality, theology, and ethics. It offers high school students an opportunity to learn about environmental justice and grow in their spirituality on one of the greenest college campuses in the country. Students live on campus and learn from expert theologians and scientists, including Nancy Tuckman and Mike Schrupp, the originators and the editors of Healing Earth. Our THEA program promotes integrated lives of faith and justice, empowering our people to respond to the challenges in which we are faced, and fosters Ignatian values, community development, creativity, and prayer. So what are some of the common learnings that we can go off about how Jesuit ways of proceeding and characteristics of our schools give us a step up for developing our schools as incubators for justice and hope? What can we learn from our historical legacy of Father Damon, Father Burroughs, Father Foley, Father Katsuras, Mike Shook, and Nancy Tuckman? How can we apply Mary Oliver's instructions for life, which can help motivate us as leaders of Jesuit schools? We know that we can pay attention. We can open up our hearts and minds and will to the movement of God in our lives and in our work, trusting that our experiences of God, common with discernment, will provide us with the insight, courage, perseverance, and creativity to choose to do the most good in our own schools and among our schools. We can open our hearts to being astonished, having the integrity and the humility to be wonderstruck, to be Godsmacked with the absolute egoless beauty of others who witness to us the mystery of God's unconditional love, grace, and goodness. And we can describe that, we can tell about it, we can create meaning out of our experiences. We can connect the dots. so that God's unfathomable love for us just as who we are, with our quest for delving deeper into compassion, consciousness, and competence, and entering into solidarity with our sisters and brothers at the margins, will lead us to create those incubators for justice and for hope. As I began my talk this morning with a poem by Mariana, I'm going to conclude with another one of her poems. And this one is entitled, I Have Just Said. I have just said something ridiculous to you. And in your response, your glorious laughter. These days, the sun is swimming back toward us. To the east, the light on the water gleams. All I know is that thank you should appear somewhere. So just in case I can't find the perfect place, thank you. Thank you.